Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 140, brought to you live by Sport Karate Zone, powered by Century Martial Arts. And I am so excited. We just had a crazy podcast on the last episode with John Paul DeJoria, and now some crazy news in the sport karate community this week as NASKA announced new rule changes. And of course, another very important episode here tonight featuring two very prominent NASKA promoters, Mike McCoy of the U.S. Open, as well as Greg Ruth of the Battle of Atlanta, two of the biggest and most historic events that we have in all of sport karate. And so first of all, gentlemen, thank you both for taking the time. It means a lot to me for you guys to just come on my show, let alone talking about such an important topic as these historically significant rule changes that we're going to talk all about throughout the evening. So first and foremost, thank you guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And what I want to start with is, as we've kind of seen everything that has happened this week since the new rules were announced, and then all of the discussion that's come about on social media, as a former competitor myself, I just want to start by framing this conversation with a reminder to the community that the NASKA promoters, anything that community members may disagree with or that may have a certain aesthetic that you may question, I want to reassure everybody that in the discussions that I've had behind the scenes and knowing some of the things that were coming down the pipe, as you saw Sport Karate Zone report on knowing some of the things coming down the pipe a few weeks ago, the promoters are only trying to do good for the sport. And sometimes as an athlete, the thing that our knee-jerk reaction tells us is a bad thing is actually a good thing for something that we didn't even think about, like player safety, right? Sometimes when you are an athlete at the highest level, it's easy to fixate on what impacts you most. And sometimes that can allow you to be blindsided by things that don't necessarily affect you, but are really important to the safety of some random athlete that shows up to fight for the first time or compete in extreme forms for the first time or whatever the case may be. And so I want to frame this discussion by saying the reason that promoters are coming on the show tonight is to clear up some misconceptions, because there's been a lot of misinformation that's been shared since these rules were announced, primarily because I think that some people are reading only the summary document and not looking at the entire rule book, but also for the things that even once you hear the explanation, you're still going to disagree with. Hopefully you can leave the podcast tonight understanding that there was a good reason for it and that it wasn't just the promoters doing it because they felt like it or because a vote went a certain way, but because there's an actual thought out purpose behind each of these things. And so, gentlemen, the first topic that I want to segue to using that kind of opening monologue is talking about the penalty point rule and point sparring. This is the thing that I've seen the most discussion about, the most memes made about, if you will. This has been a huge topic of conversation, and that is, if you read the summary document, and actually I'm going to quote it, and you're going to hear me refer directly to the summary document a few times tonight. But if you quote the summary document with regard to sparring, there is a sentence that reads, quote, "Non-safety violations, running, leaving the ring, falling to avoid contact, are no longer penalty points and won't cause disqualification after 3. And the point to clear up here is that the fact that it is no longer a penalty point does not mean that it is not a point the other direction. Meaning, if I fall to avoid the fight or if I step out of bounds, it's no longer a penalty that 3 of them will result in disqualification, as we have seen come into play within the last couple of years for, I think it was a 3rd out of bounds penalty in a grand championship fight. Somebody got disqualified, right? Yep. So the idea is to not disqualify people for something that is not a safety or sportsmanship issue, like stepping out of bounds. But it is still a point the other way, even though we're not calling it a penalty. It's just essentially a scoring technique. If I step out of bounds, that's no different than if I got punched. It's just not called a penalty. So there's my soapbox about this, because I've seen so many posts about it. But now, more importantly, I want to hear from you guys talking a little bit about the nuances of that rule and also some of the backstory of where it comes from.
Well, Jackson, I think you covered it really, really well.
Absolutely.
And the whole purpose of the change in the rule was to only have penalty points for things that were safety or unsportsmanlike reasons to do that. And most of us felt like it was a little bit overkill to give somebody a penalty point for running around the ring or stepping out of bounds. And we just simply said, if it's not a unsportsmanlike or a safety violation, then we're just going to award a point to the other side, just like you just said it, just like they got scored on with the technique. So now it has to be a unsportsmanlike or a safety consideration for there to be an actual penalty point given. An example would be, somebody, hitting really, really late, really hard would be unsafe and, considered unsportsmanlike, really. So,
and the awarding of the points hasn't changed. The center still be awarding the penalty points and the points, right? So it's not like, but and nothing else changes on penalty for disqualification with, a unanimous vote of the judges and things like that, or 3 penalty points is an automatic DQ. But now I think since we've taken away this potential 3 penalty point disqualification piece, you'll see those center referees giving more points for avoiding fighting. Whatever it is, we've given you a 7-foot ring now, right? The fighters requested a 7-foot ring. We gave them a big old ring. So now they run like crazy. Some of them literally run. So we're going to start. That's a point, because this guy can't possibly score on him if he runs or if he falls down or if he goes out of bounds. So we're focused on making sure those guys are fighting, but not calling them penalty points, just giving the guy a point, like you said, Jackson, like he just scored with a hand technique.
Right. And I love the way that you talk about the way the center referees, when there's a higher penalty, right? When there's an actual penalty on the line that could ultimately result in disqualification. What Mr. McCoy is saying for the audience is that a center referee might be more hesitant to make that call, which I think we've often seen coaches and fighters alike be frustrated by that, because you'll see somebody turn their back and take 2 or 3 steps and then reset in a fighting stance. By definition, turning your back and taking 2 or 3 steps is running. And so you've got one coach yelling that that's running, and the center's hesitant to call it because it was only a few steps. So
we saw that in Miami, right? 2024 Miami, where the 2-round grand championship match was ended on an automatic disqualification for a 3rd penalty point as a result of going out of the ring. And everybody hated it. I mean, we had like a 15-minute powwow. Are we actually going to end the match this way? We felt bad about it because it doesn't seem like that was quite right. But the point had already been called, right? So there was no taking it back. So I think now that gives us the flexibility to award points for people who are not fighting, and at the same time only retain those that are safety hazards to qualify for the 3 penalties that will get you disqualified.
Right. And I want to point out, since we're specifically referencing that fight at Pan Am's last year, both of the fighters that were in that final were fighting. The fighter who wound up getting disqualified, it literally just seemed like an accident that they stepped out of bounds. It's not like they were running from the fight. You could argue maybe better grounds for disqualification.
Absolutely.
Just want to make that very clear. And then as we roll forward, because we're going to talk about another big point fighting topic here in just a few moments, remember, this is a live podcast for a reason. So to the audience, if you have thoughts about these rules, if you have questions about the explanations, feel free to absolutely drop some respectful discussion in the comment section below. This is not just for the promoters to kind of talk at you about everything that has happened. This is an open forum for discussion where they can answer questions and bring better understanding to some of the rule changes and some of the misconceptions that have come about over the last week. While we're on the topic of point sparring, I want to bring up another one of the big rule changes that has led to a lot of debate amongst the community, and that is the move to a 7-point spread as opposed to a 10-point spread, keeping in mind that we are currently still using 2-point body kicks. And it seems that many athletes have been frustrated by the fact that, the fight could end quicker now that you're 4 kicks away from being spread or 3 kicks and a punch, as opposed to 5 kicks away from being spread. At the end of the day, by the numbers, it's not that big of a difference. The statistics say that somebody that's down 7-0 by a wide majority is not going to make that comeback. However, I understand the fighter's perspective of saying, we paid a registration fee to fight. If I take 4 kicks, I still want to be able to have that extra clash. I want that extra 30 seconds in the ring. I understand that side of it too. And so now that both sides have kind of been voiced, I'll give it up to the guys that actually know what they're talking about with regard to the new rules, and give you guys the chance to discuss the new spread rule.
Jackson, I think the discussion was more like this and more around this. And that's the fact that we're a sport that has, kids age 5 all the way to adults almost age 70 competing in our sport. As a matter of fact, I think it would be a fair thing to say that the youth of our tournaments are the largest percentage of the participants that attend our events. So we wanted to make it safe for everyone. And I think sometimes when you have this, opportunity to, I guess, maybe showboat a little bit because you're really up in score, and you do something maybe you shouldn't do, and you either injure yourself or injure the person across from you. That was the consideration we gave the most thought to when we made this decision to go back to 7 points. Yeah. So basically that was it. It wasn't to punish anybody. It wasn't to be mean or cruel to the adult fighters. But when you're looking at running an organization and you're looking at tournaments themselves, we have to consider something that's fair and good for all ages, not just one age group.
And frankly, Greg probably watches more sparring matches than absolutely anybody, right? Because when that part of the tournament comes around, Greg will get up and go to each ring and watch the competition, right? He's there in case there's protests, and et cetera, as an arbitrator. And I do a lot of refereing for sparring. It's rare, to your point earlier, Jackson, that anybody ever comes back from a 7-point spread. I know I've never seen it. As a referee, I've never seen a fighter come back from a 7-point spread and win. Never seen it. So I think it's kind of academic, and maybe they want more time. But what I have seen, and I have seen for 40, 50 years, is that when somebody's down by 5 or 6 points and they start getting a little frustrated and a little desperate, that guy is coming swinging. And the old adage was, when I get back to my hometown and I go to my students, they say, "Did you win, Sensei?" And you said, "No, I got disqualified." That's easier to tell them that I got beat 10-0. So we're trying to prevent that guy who is down by 6, down by 7, from just deciding I'm going all out. And I have seen that a lot. So when balancing those two, one of which is a safety related issue of this guy who's getting beat, kind of losing it a little bit, versus somebody coming back from a 7-point deficit, this almost never happens. This happens a lot. And so we're trying to prevent that. We don't want to embarrass anybody, and we certainly don't want to put them in a situation where they feel embarrassed, where they could, be aggressive. Now, granted, once that person does something like that, we can disqualify them. But they would rather go down and being disqualified than being humiliated. And we've seen that, like I said, for 40 years. It's never changed. So when we went to 10-point spread, remember we used to do 10-point spread in the Grand Championships and all those. We went to 10-point spreads for all the other matches and all the divisions. That's when we started seeing more and more of the potential safety issue and felt like we needed to cut that back. I mean, people who were adamant about 10-point spreads changed their mind and went to 7-point spreads because we just thought it was safer.
Right. And that's one thing that I really wanted the community to hear on that issue in particular, is the fact that it was a decision made for player safety. And I want to highlight that that's on both sides, right? It's safety on the side of the losing fighter, because the winning fighter may take that 9-point advantage as an opportunity to throw a wild tornado kick or some showboat technique that could injure the other opponent if they're not using appropriate control. Or it could also be protecting the fighter that is up, right? As you guys just described, the fighter who's down, getting frustrated, having a moment of weakness and swinging for the fences. It protects both fighters when you're in that type of a spread situation. And don't get me wrong, I'm seeing some great comments about, awesome stories of times that people have closed that gap, and high-level fighters have made these iconic moments of closing in on a 7 or 8 point spread and coming back to win. I know, Mr. McCoy, you said anecdotally you've never seen it as a referee. That we're not disputing that it has happened. And as a fan, I'm not disputing that it's freaking awesome when it does happen, because it's exciting. But from this point forward, maybe those exciting comebacks need to be from down 6-0 instead of down 8-0, right?
Well,
again, player safety is paramount.
And I think we talked about the 10-point spread for grand championships in the past years before we went to 10 for all of them. We did that because now we're talking about elite fighters, right? We went to 10-point spread because we're at this elite level. Remember, like Greg said initially, we have to make rules for everybody, green belts, brown belts, because a lot of people use these rules for all of their divisions. So we try to keep it safe for even those that are, divisions that are really different. And one of the comments was about if I have any specific examples where somebody lost it. No, I don't have any specific examples. I mean, I might judge in fighting, I might do 30, 40, 50 matches in a tournament. But I do know I have seen fighters get frustrated. And when they say go, they have not done it yet. They're not blitzers. That's why they're getting beat so bad. Then they suddenly start blitzing. And in my experience and what I've seen is that's when people get the highest probability of getting injured. So again, to me, it's weighing the risks of enhanced probability of injuries versus how many fights have actually come back from 7 points down. And, again, we had the grands at 10-point spread because that's the elites. But this rule is for everybody. So will we consider if that seems to be the popularity or if people really want to see 10-point spreads back in the grands, stuff like that? Yeah, we'll consider that. We changed it once, we can change it again, but we're going to see this year how that goes and make sure that it's done safely. And then if everybody seems to be okay with a 10-point for the grands, I'm okay with it.
And I think that's a really critical point that I want to highlight here is the fact that at some point the promoters have to make a decision and it has to carry on for a set period of time, right? I can think back to a few years ago where I think it was Creative Forms that a suggestion of new rules was floated out, and it was really close to the timing of the first tournament. And then ultimately, things had to be walked back. I forget what level of approval or official release that news had come to. But the bottom line is that it was a mess, right? And so what the promoters are doing here is they're saying, this is what we're going to do for 2026. It's a set period of time. And if the decisions are proven wrong, that those elite fighters in the grands really do benefit from having a 10-point spread, or any of the other things we're going to talk about tonight, the promoters are here to tell you collectively that they're willing to listen to that.
Just remember
over the last week saying that the promoters don't listen. And I want to make it very clear that, as we can see, they are listening. It just takes time to implement.
Yeah. And just remember, not the first person to 3 anymore. So we've made quite a number of strides over the last couple of decades.
Sure.
Well, you've also got to keep in mind, too, that when you have inconsistencies, like, before it was this way for teams, it was this way for individuals, it was this way for overall grands, that makes it difficult for also our officials to keep track of, well, what am I judging here? So when you're consistent and you make it the same for all levels of sparring, it just makes it easier to officiate too. Not to mention that it's a little more safe, we believe.
Absolutely. Now, another great point that I've seen about the spread rule, and I've seen this from a variety of different sources. I think the person who just commented it recently was David Clifton. I want to give you credit. Yeah. But this idea of a 7-point spread would be more palatable to some of the high-level fighters if NASKA had moved to 1-point body kicks, right? And I know that it's a very divisive topic if you're for or against 1-point body kicks. Right. But just so that the community kind of has the satisfaction of hearing it, I'm certain that in some of these discussions, the question of 1-point versus 2-point body kicks had to have come up. Updates from what's going on behind closed doors and some of the discussion between promoters and ultimately why we're sticking with 1-point body kicks. Or sorry, 2-point body kicks. Excuse me. Why we're sticking with 2-point body kicks.
The discussion was there, Jackson. And to be real honest with you, I think that the reason we stayed with the 2-point body kick is because we want to continue to have, competitors kick. I think the fear by most of us was that if we take away the 2-point kick to the body, then the competitors won't kick anymore. They'll just blitz each other all the time. Yeah. And that's not.
Historically, that's been the issue.
Yeah, that's been the issue.
But I will say this. What I have heard from people who've complained about the 2-point body kick is they have been to other events. I have been to other events. I've been to the Irish Open several times, and there's 1-point body kicks. And I will say that when the 2-point body kick was developed, we did it because we wanted people to kick more, just like the PKA when it was formed had a kick counter. They needed those guys to kick to make it look different than bad boxing. Today, the fighters are far more sophisticated and far more skilled, I believe, especially with head kicks. So it probably would not be an issue. And I think a lot of people are not as dug in on the 2-point kick as they were. I was one of the ones that was dug in on the 2-point kick because personally, we had an event aired on ESPN by a PKA kickboxing event in the early days of the U.S. Open. And we had two of the greatest fighters in the country fighting for the grand championship and point in the ring in between the kickboxing matches. And all they did was exchange reverse punches and back fists. It was embarrassing to present this to the world that this is sport karate. So I was adamant that we got to make these guys kick and we need to do whatever it takes to make them kick. But having seen other organizations and other matches where it's only a 1-point body kick, they still kick to the head pretty good. They still get 2 points for kick to the head. So maybe it's worth taking a shot and saying, hey, from a consistency standpoint, from a training perspective, fighters want to be able to train a certain way. And if they're used to training from most of the other organizations with 1-point body kicks, maybe we'll do it too. And as long as the fighting continues to be compelling and really emphasize good martial arts skill, then I'm all for it. That'll be 27. We've already put the rule book out. We can't make those kind of rule changes. And we made a bunch of them. So we're trying not to overwhelm the world, but we're definitely open-minded to the 1-point kick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be really refreshing for a lot of people to hear because obviously glancing at the comments, there are plenty of people that feel very strongly about it being a 1-point body kick instead of the 2 points. But I think that an important thing for everybody to realize is that I think it is an important part of the decision-making for the promoters to be considering what makes it exciting, right? Mm-hmm. And if the promoters want to see athletes kick more, which Mr. McCoy, I agree with your point that I think that with the level of fighters that we have today, I think that they're going to kick anyway. That's just my personal thought is that I expect that the fighters would keep kicking regardless, right? Yeah. However, the fact that the hesitation was there because of the fact that we want to keep the fights exciting and we want to continue showcasing kicks is that is an inherently good thing. Yes. Because for anybody in this community that wants the sport to grow, the entertainment aspect of both forms and weapons and point fighting is essential to the growth of the sport because it's the entertainment aspect that's what attracts sponsors, that what attract viewers, that then attracts more sponsors. Like that is the way the sport grows, is by what these athletes are doing, being entertaining, and the rules kind of creating an environment where the most entertaining matches are going to take place.
And you even see UFC when they're running commercials and other MMA, they love to show head kicks. They're showing head kicks all the time. That's exciting. The audience loves that. We need to encourage that. We've always been trying to encourage that to separate ourselves from other types of fighting. And that as long as that's going to be maintained, we'll still have good kicking skills and demonstrate good kicking skills. Then I have no personal reason to have 2-point body kicks. So when I fought, everything was 1 point. It didn't matter at all. And I still kick to the head all the time.
So keep in mind about this, Jackson, because there can be arguments to both sides. It's real easy to get down. Well, with 2-point body kicks, you can get down pretty quick. But on the other hand of that, it's also easy to come back with 2-point kicks than it is with just a 1-point kick too. So if a guy gets down 3 or 4 points, and he's only going to get 1-point kick to the body, he's going to be forced to kick to the head. And if he can't, then, he's in trouble. Yeah. Or she. I should say he or she.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And to that point, Mr. Ruth, as of right now, a 3-point deficit with 10 seconds to fight doesn't seem like a big deal, right? All of a sudden with 1-point body kicks, maybe that 3-point deficit with 10 seconds to fight, and it takes 5 seconds for a clash to happen and then the score to be given and then the fighters to reset. All of a sudden, you're not 2 clashes away from tying or winning. You're now 3 clashes away. Again, not counting, head kicks or jump spinning head kicks, but it's beside the point. So with all of this being said, that this is great point fighting discussion, and we could spend a 3-hour podcast talking about the nuances of the spread and penalty points and what is or what isn't a penalty point. But I wanted to open the show with that because so many people are talking about it now. One of the most critical things to be discussed in this show is, Mr. McCoy, a few thoughts that you wanted to share on things that might be coming down the pipe that have not been announced in the rules update, but just some things that may be influenced by some of the rules, right, when it comes to memberships and things of that nature.
Sure.
And just kind of letting the community know that there is more coming, and that it's not just these are the rule changes and we're done. Not changing any more rules, but there is more information that'll be coming in the coming weeks.
So what I want everybody to understand is that in the past, we've always had one big meeting in June, and that was it. We made all these decisions. That was it. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have regular monthly meetings. The last 3 months have been massive number of meetings and discussion of every conceivable topic, to the point of saying, well, we just can't address that one right now. We'll address that one later. So this release did not include everything. This release was just what we thought was imperative to get to the competitors, to make sure they knew the new rules, especially the age rules, all the new weapons divisions, so the 14s, 15s, 16s, 17s could start practicing comma and bow, right? All this stuff had to get out there, and we had to get the rule book done. Now that the rule book's done, we're not going to change any more rules, because the rule book was the hardest of all, but there's other announcements coming. One of which we've already voted on. We voted on in the last couple of days, is that now all of the tournaments are going to be ranked the same. We're not going to have a tiered ranking system for 2026. There is no 6A. There is no 5A. All 12 tournaments will give the same points. So you don't have to worry about deciding which tournament you want to go to based on points. You're able to go whichever tournaments you want, which ones you want to support, if it's all of them or some of them, without worrying about the 6A or 5A. That's already been decided. The second one is we dug into membership offerings, right? There's been a lot of discussion around, can we offer more memberships, different types of memberships for non-competitors. That's what we call associate memberships for parents. Everybody who enters a tournament should be a member of some sort of free membership, right? That they get on a mailing list, so they get constant communication and information from NASKA and the individual promoters about what's happening. We haven't done that in the past. And we have some other things in the hopper too that I think will make a lot of people happy, that address things like competitors who only compete at 1 or 2 tournaments a year. Muhammad would always talk about, I got California guys that only go to my tournament. You know, at the U.S. Open, I got a bunch of foreigners that only come to the U.S. Open. You know, we need to have a way to keep them involved in the association without being the same as those that travel the entire circuit. So we have more announcements to come, more things going to be decided, and we will be releasing those, some of them next week, and maybe even more as the year goes on.
For sure. And I want to highlight on that point, Andrew Cabalon bringing up a great point here, that, you know, this has happened before where all the tournaments were rated the same and all the events were well attended. And of course, that's the outcome that we hope to see. So obviously a big congrats to the events like Ocean States and Toronto that were kind of being put on the 6A pedestal as of the update a couple, or I guess about a week ago. But I do think it's a big step in the right direction that we, applaud those tournaments for the selection that they had, but also recognizing that it's probably best for all the tournaments to be on an even playing field in terms of points.
It's best for everybody, right? I mean, it's, again, we're trying to make everybody better. It's better for the promoters. Everybody's on an equal playing field to make their event the best they can. All the competitors now can pick whichever tournament they want. They're not forced to go to the 6As and then skip some of the 5As. They're all the same. Pick your favorites, right? Talk to your promoters. Take Texas, for example, the newest, the hardest to get the big names to come. Now they have an equal footing like anybody else. So it was just something that as we started developing and having all these meetings and having all these decisions, it just kind of naturally flowed out of, we're all in this together. So let's support each other.
Absolutely. I love it. And since we've mentioned the fact that, new membership packages are in the works and will be announced in the coming weeks, that brings me to another point that there's been a lot of discussion about, which is the new requirement that in order to be eligible for prize money, you have to be a NASKA member. Which I want to point out that if you just put that on paper and forget that, NASKA had not previously required that, on paper, that makes sense. Yes. Other leagues require you to be a part of their league, even to register for the event. You have to be a member of that league in order to compete. Forget the prize money, which, by the way, NASKA offers more prize money than any other league that I'm aware of. I want to point that out at first, that on paper, having to be a member to be eligible for prize money makes sense. However, I totally understand that the fact that it was a new requirement caught some people off guard, right? And
and what caught them off guard was this assumption that, okay, I'm going to go pick up my $200 and they're going to take $99 out of my $200 to get my $200. It gives me $101. that was never anybody. There's never been a discussion about that. I mean, we've talked about ways to get people to become members, but one thing NASKA has never done is coerce people into doing anything. We earn your business. We want you to come to the event. For example, if everybody who attends the AKA Warrior Cup in January automatically is a NASKA member. Now, there's other types of memberships and procedures that we will follow for the professional athletes, the ones that get paid, for under black belts. We will come out with some different ones. We just, that needs a lot of discussion that we just couldn't get around to because we had to get the rule book out. That was the priority, was the division changes in the rule book. We'll come back with memberships. And believe me, I apologize that everybody automatically assumed that to get their money, they're going to have their $79 ripped out of it. That was never the intention, but I can see where it logically can be deduced for that. But that is not going to be the plan. We'll come out with some really good stuff that I think people will be very excited to hear.
For sure. And one thing, and then Mr. Ruth, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, but I want to say this for the promoters because it's not something that would necessarily be front of mind for them to say. And that is, a lot of the discussion that I've seen is talking about the promoters lining their pockets. And I want to be very clear, when you pay a NASKA membership, that money does not immediately go into the promoters' pockets. That is not supplementing the Christmas fund for Mike McCoy or Greg Ruth or anybody. That's not where that money goes. All of that money is organizational money that gets reinvested into the growth and development of the sport. It's not like there's some pot of money that the promoters get all these, memberships and then they distribute it out to all the other promoters. That's not how it works. That money is reinvested into the sport. It's not something that is just an extra perk to line the pockets of the promoters. And with that, I just wanted to make that clear to everybody, again, because I've had some conversations and know some behind the scenes of how some of this stuff works. But Mr. Ruth, your thoughts on kind of this whole part of the discussion?
Well, I think the first thing you have to understand is that, we as a sport that's been around for 43 years as NASKA don't just make decisions that only benefit us. So the biggest thing that we have to understand is that we want to be able to do more for the competitor. And the best way to do more for the competitor is to, attract sponsors that will give monies that we can give back to the competitor either through prize money or other ways. So, but for us to do that, we have to grow memberships because the one thing that sponsors want the most are eyeballs. They want views. They want to know, how many members do you have in your organization? So we want to make sure that, we're growing the membership process the right way so that we can grow the sport the right way.
Right.
So we're kicking around a lot of ideas, and there's some things in the works that could come out soon about, what we're going to do for competitors at the banquet versus what we're doing now. And there's just a lot of things in the works, and it's just like Mike said, and it's frustrating to us that we can't get things done as quickly as we'd like, but we are doing the best we can at it, and we want to make sure that we got the rules right first, because as an arbitrator, I can tell you, the rules needed work, and it still needs work, and we're not where we need to be yet, but we're getting there. Yeah. We got there a lot quicker this time than we have before. So yeah. I'm excited about it. And I just think that everybody needs to understand when they ask about memberships, well, memberships is what grows the sport. And when the sport grows, that's what brings in more money, to give back to the athletes.
Exactly.
Yeah, very well put. I love that. And again, we're going to get into more of the nuances of all of this starting right now. And so I'm going to, as I prefaced at the beginning of the show, I'm literally going to pull up the summary document. And now that we've hit on some of those big discussion points, I just want to go through and make sure that we at least touch on a little bit of everything, including what I think across the board are some really, really good changes for forms and weapons. And so we'll start, let's see. Division changes you'll love, new black belt divisions. Okay. So I'm going to read off a series of bullet points here, and then we'll kind of open it all up for discussion together. So we'll go 4 bullet points deep here. So 14 to 17, boys and girls divisions, expanding to include bladed and non-bladed traditional and creative weapons. It makes the teenage divisions reflect exactly the way that the adult weapons divisions are structured. I love it. I could rave about that more. We'll talk about it in a second. Korean Challenge, now a NASKA rated division, with the winner earning a spot in the divisional grand championship for juniors or in the overall grand championship for the adults. So what all the Korean martial artists have been wanting since the Korean Challenge came out, for it to be fully kind of brought into NASKA and accepted as a regular division, we're getting that, which I think is excellent for Korean martial artists. And then the last 2 points here before I open it up for discussion. Plus, men's and women's divisions are being expanded to include bladed and non-bladed traditional creative weapons, extreme forms, extreme weapons, and Korean forms. We have seen phenomenal attendance and we have seen phenomenal talent in the 30-plus division, and I think it's completely appropriate that we are rewarding those senior competitors by giving them access to those specialized divisions within their age group and not creating this, weird circumstance where you had to compete in 18-plus to have access to a division. And the fact that this new rule update eliminates that, I think, is a good step in the right direction. And then finally, the last point here, 18-plus men's and women's, now including open traditional forms with full details in the updated rule book. Essentially what it sounds like, and correct me if I misstate this or if I'm wrong at all, but essentially creating a division where the Kenpo athletes and the Chinese athletes wind up competing together, which I think a lot of times in the last couple of years, we've seen some really good attendance at certain events in the Kenpo divisions, but we've also seen some events where there's just a couple of competitors, and the same is true of the Chinese divisions. And so this gives them an opportunity to compete against each other in the division, still earning a right to runoffs that is separate from the Japanese and Korean competitors, but giving them a better kind of baseline level of competition in the divisions. Yeah. So that was a lot, but in my opinion, I think it's a lot of good in terms of forms of weapons. And I know there's going to be a variety of opinions, but reactions to kind of those 4 bullet points, the things that stand out most to the two of you.
Well, I think, Jackson, to your point and I'll just do the 14 to 17-year-olds, we just felt like that we need to more prepare those competitors to be ready to transition into the adult divisions. And oh, by the way, those have been for almost 5 years now our very largest divisions in almost every tournament. The bigger events, I mean, we're talking anywhere from 25 to 30 competitors have been in those divisions. So this kind of splits that up a little bit and give people the opportunity to specialize. And, you can still do both divisions. So if you want to do a bladed division, sword, and you want to do a non-bladed bow, then you can. And it just prepares them for the 18-plus divisions. And then, carrying that on over into the 30-plus just seemed like the right thing to do to give those guys the same opportunity. Because let's be honest, all sports that we watch on TV, you're in your prime when you're in your early 30s.
Yeah. Tony, I was talking to Tony Hamsani, who's somebody who lives really close to me. We talk all the time. He's a huge supporter of the Open, huge supporter of our sport. He even mentioned that a 35-plus division for Trad Challenge and would be huge. And part of the reason for expansion of the 30-plus divisions was because to get the different levels of competition, they had to go down to the 18-plus. So if there's enough of them, and he thinks there's a lot of them, then we should have, and like I said, they'll just continue from their teenage years into their 20s and right into their 30s, they'll still compete. So we've already started that process of expanding those divisions. I think you'll see more of that in 2027, just based on that one conversation. But again, he has a big team. He's very, very he has the pulse of what's going on in the sport. So we're listening and we're trying to adapt that provide what they want. So Andrew mentioned something too. This is something I want to bring up about those divisions.
Absolutely.
The Japanese Okinawan, the Japanese traditional challenge was now 2 rounds, but there was also some discussion about how can somebody compete in an 18-plus grand and let's say a 40-plus grand. If you win the 18-plus traditional challenge, you will, he likes the 35-plus. Of course you do, Andrew. If you win the 18-plus traditional challenge, you will be able to compete for the 18-plus, or you'll be in the runoffs at least, for the 18-plus overall grand. If you win your division in 40 plus, you'll do that one too, because we have what we call specialty divisions: Korean Challenge, Trad Challenge, Open Weight, Demo Team, and Sync. Since there are no age delineations in those, if you compete in those, you're eligible to compete in the grands or the overalls or the runoffs, or whatever you're going to call them, for the 18 plus division. And a part of that, if you look at Trad Challenge now, which is so big, and Open Weight, which is so big, doing a 35 plus or a 30 plus Open Weight and a 30 plus Trad Challenge for men and women would probably be very, very big. And in which case we could roll that into their grand championships, right? Absolutely.
No, I think those are great points. And I just want to make one more point on the juniors, bladed and non-bladed being split. It sounds like, Mr. Ruth, that might be your notifications are turned on if you want to mute that. But anyway, with regard to the juniors and splitting non-bladed and bladed, I think that we're going to see a lot of juniors take advantage of that. Because I can remember Esteban Tremblay is a great example of somebody that actively competes in both as an adult, because we don't always see that. Sometimes people stay in their lane and they don't do both bladed and non-bladed even as adults. But Esteban was somebody that was very talented with commas and really enjoyed doing commas. But I remember when he was talking to me about wanting to start doing it, one of our big concerns was, are you going to be able to be taken seriously? Because you're a bow guy. Everybody knows you as a bow guy. When you go out there with commas, are people going to find it strange, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a legitimate concern because it was something that was done so rarely. And I think Esteban has obviously proved that his comma skills are not a gimmick and that they're an actual threat to win an overall grant, right?
But take Al Jahanbash from the junior. Al Jahanbash runs sword and bow great. You know, his dad trains him in weapons, right? Not just a weapon. So these guys would love the opportunity to show what they know in other weapons. I think it'll be fun. Yeah.
If only this had happened a decade ago and you would have seen Jackson do a sword form. But anyway.
That's hey, you can still come out and do a sword form. Nobody's stopping you, buddy.
Well, you can do it in the 30 plus division.
We'll see.
That's just Reed.
Moving on to next big bullet point here. So youth division splits for large divisions. I think this is a great new innovation for the youth competitors. So again, I'll just read it verbatim and then we'll talk about it. To ensure fair and efficient competition, large youth divisions will now be split by age. Any forms or weapons divisions 17 and under with 20 or more competitors, so a different cutoff than previously, 20 or more competitors will be split into two divisions based solely on age. Both divisions will award NASKA points for 1st through 8th place. That's big. Winners of each split division will go to the divisional grands. So one of the innovations here is that the runoffs are going to be even bigger and more exciting, particularly in these divisions that wind up having splits. Often the CMX divisions and, frankly, several traditional divisions wind up getting split as well. And we're going to see more representation in grands, which I think is fantastic. Splits are determined only by age, not by competitor count, and no additional splits will be made. And so if you're in the 14-15 division and there's 10 14-year-olds and 10 15-year-olds, they will be split into separate divisions. The 14-year-olds will compete against each other for a spot in runoffs. The 15-year-olds will do the same. And then finally, for seeding, the top 4 rated competitors from the combined division will be A seeds. And so if you're that older 15-year-old and you've got a seed, then you're going to keep that A seed when the division is split. Same thing is true if you were, the 14-year-old that has been a few tournaments and you've already gained some points in that division, you're going to get to keep your seed as well. The remaining top competitors will get B seeds, right? So if that is, let's say you are the 5th seed and you get split into the division, but on your side of the split, there's only 2 A seeds, then that 5th seeded competitor would then earn a B seed to get a premier spot in that split division. And then C seeds are a little bit more unique, maybe applied during the first 2 events of the new season. So again, referring only to the first 2 events. And that's when there's a secondary seeding system. The announcement cites the ISK or the Crane ratings. And who knows if that'll even come into effect, right? Typically, ISKA ratings would only have any impact at the U.S. Open because obviously that rating system is very different from the NASKA rating system, as Mr. McCoy and I could tell you all about. But we'll leave that for another discussion another day. But the big thing there is splitting these junior divisions that are often over 20 competitors into the age groups. I love it. I think it increases fairness and great competition for the juniors, and it's going to make the runoffs that much more exciting.
I agree. And one of the things that is probably overlooked by some people, and I was talking to one parent, I can't remember who it was, and I told them this, and they weren't even aware of it, is, but a lot of people are, is if you're a 13-year-old moving to the 14-year-old and 15-year-old division next year, it is not uncharacteristic to go from a winner to a not winner or a finalist most of the time. So the 14-year-olds and the 16-year-olds can be discouraged, especially going to the larger events, because really this big split rule only affects 4 tournaments. That happened this year. We've only seen 4 tournaments that would really benefit tremendously from this. But the 14-year-olds they think they have no chance of even placing in those tournaments because the divisions are so big. This gives them some encouragement for tournaments with larger divisions to still get some good points. And we have seen gross disparities in numbers of 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds because the 14-year-olds are just, this is not the year for me. I'll wait till next year. So I'll go to 4 or 5 tournaments, and then next year I'll hit it hard because I'm on the older one. So we know for a fact that exists. Our stats prove that. Our metrics prove that. We've had people tell us that. So I think it'll help that as much as anything else. And it will allow us to run the tournament more efficiently. The current split system, the way it works, and having been at the AKA 2 years ago, judging 16 and 17-year-old forms competitors, me and 2 other judges sat here and watched 165 weapons and empty hand forms in a row because we split several divisions, then put the winners back together. So you run extra divisions. And more importantly, it's because the split doesn't really split them. It just makes them run in 2 separate divisions, brings them back together. You can't take them to a different ring. In this case, Ronnie and Eric, with their wisdom on coordination, if we split a division and there's an empty ring, like the 9 and unders are done, they can move the 14s down there and run that thing, right? And so then we can move the tournament along. We can use the skills that we have from our coordinators and our systems, right? Uventex and Matt, they can do that. We can move an entire division to a ring in seconds, move the competitors and get it going so we can shorten these huge durations of running these large divisions for 6 and 7 and 8 hours in a row. So there's huge benefits here all the way around, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Mr. Ruth, any thoughts?
No, I agree completely with what Mike's saying. The biggest reason to do this was efficiency. And also the biggest reason to do it was because it's very difficult, like Mike said, to sit there and watch that many competitors from an official standpoint and give a fair assessment of what each competitor is doing.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Absolutely. And then related to this is the fact that on the flip side, in the adult division, there is no longer going to be a split for large divisions. As we've already discussed, it only affects a minority of tournaments and a minority of divisions within those larger tournaments that the adults actually wind up having to get split. And as we just discussed, one of the biggest benefits to splitting the divisions for the juniors is increased opportunities to points and increased opportunities to runoffs that at the adult level, which we all kind of think of as the professional level. Don't get me wrong, there are professional quality juniors as well.
Yeah.
But we all recognize that when you turn 18 is when you start becoming eligible for prize money, and prize money, therefore, helps you meet that definition of professional. And so for the adult divisions, it doesn't serve the same purpose. And for efficiency reasons, it's probably better to just keep those adults all in one division anyway.
And we haven't had the 42s and the 50s like we had with the 14, 15, and 16, 17 boys, right? I think Eric did the whole analysis, and the biggest division we've ever had in adult black belt was 25.
Mm-hmm.
So splitting at 26 didn't make any difference.
Right, exactly. Okay. All right. So moving on from splits, the next bullet point that I have here is let's talk seniors. So more for the seniors. So seniors with a new age rule, they will now choose one competition age per tournament. So at the beginning of the tournament, you declare 18 plus, 30 plus, 40 plus, 50 plus, so on and so forth. That is the division that you're going to compete in at that event. The choice applies to all forms, weapons, and sparring. And then the specialty divisions, as we mentioned, traditional challenge, Korean challenge, open weight, sync, and demo remain open to all 18 plus competitors. After the age of 18, there is no split in those divisions. And so if you elect to compete in 30 plus for that event as a senior competitor, you can still compete in the specialty divisions, which includes traditional challenge, open weight sparring.
Right.
Then, as we've discussed, if we see that, or if no, I'm not part of this, if NASKA sees that, there's a lot of great senior sparring participation, then maybe something in the future that could be considered is doing a 30 or a 35 plus open weight division as well. But for this year, those specialty divisions, even if you declare that you're competing 40 plus, you can still do those specialty divisions. And then just closing out the bullet points here. The next bullet point is saying exactly what I just said. And then seniors may earn rankings across multiple age groups. So whereas for a senior, it may be advantageous at one tournament or another to select a certain age group, across the season when it comes to collecting points, you don't have to only collect points in the one age group. Might make the most sense to maximize your points. However, you do have the freedom to collect points in however many divisions you want to. It's just per tournament, you're electing that one specific division. Behind kind of the discussions that led to this, because I know we've got a lot of phenomenal seniors in the sport. We want to support them. We want to give them the most opportunities to succeed. And there's been several changes over the last 5 years and exactly how we work the senior divisions. So any thoughts on this update and kind of how it came to be?
Yes, of course. We're offering the 30 plus guys almost basically the same divisions that we're offering the 18 plus, with the one exception. They don't have a Japanese, it's just traditional and Korean. But the big news is, in my opinion, for those 40 plus, 50 plus, and 60 plus competitors, we have changed creative to creative and extreme with music optional. So now if that 60 plus guy wants to do that cartwheel in their form, they can.
Chris Casamassa, you're talking about?
Well, I wasn't going to call any names, Mike.
And add music, and I think that they have the option now, right? So we've added that. But to your question, you can't give points to somebody in a division they didn't compete in. So if I am competing 35 plus, and then I go compete in 18 plus at a different tournament, I can't take those points with me to the 35 plus because I didn't compete against those guys. Right? It's your choice. You might say, hey, I'm in a tournament. The 18 plus division looks pretty ripe, right? I think I can go down there and win. I want to get into the, maybe a chance of winning more money or whatever. That's your option. But you should not be able to, from a fairness perspective, to take those points into a division which you did not earn them.
Right. Absolutely. Awesome.
But at the same time, you still have traditional challenge and Korean challenge to go down and get into that.
Correct.
Run off for the bigger money. So
the problem is traditional challenge and Korean challenge are going to get big. So that's why the discussion came about. And same with open weight, a 30 plus or a 35 plus open weight division and a trad challenge division for men to get, to allow those guys to have their own division, would still, I think, be very successful. And that's what we look for. And that's why we expanded all these weapons and forms divisions from 14 to 17. And some people complain, more forms and weapons divisions. Yeah. That's where the market is. They demand it. They're coming in droves. We're talking, they're the most, by far, the biggest divisions in our tournament. You must service the customer, and the customer in this case wants more things to compete in, and we need to keep the divisions down smaller to make it more competitive and more chances to win. That's just the nature of tournament business.
And Jackson, to be fair, we are always constantly thinking of how can we give the sparring competitors more opportunities to spar. It's just a lot more difficult. And I will say this, the U.S. Open offers multiple sparring divisions, and so does the Battle of Atlanta. When it comes to, we have Battle Mania with continuous and all the things that we do, and they have continuous and other things. So those opportunities are there. It's just not always in point sparring.
And at the Open, what we've done for non-NASKA rated divisions is double elimination. That's been hugely successful. The competitors in those divisions love, and we exploded our sparring divisions for the black belt, single A divisions, and all the other black belt ones. They just love double eliminations. It is a time-consuming thing to do. So, I've been pitching it pretty hard in the NASKA meetings about we should consider this because I think the fighters would love it, right? But we got to find a way to do it. It could push us into Sunday morning as far as I think, but I think we can find a way to do it, and I think it'd be well received.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to make the point because I just don't want the people that are sparring competitors think we don't think about giving them more opportunities to compete, because we are. We just haven't been able to figure out how to logistically do it without going to 3 or 4 days.
For sure. Okay, we've still got a lot to cover, so I want to keep us rolling here. Next couple of bullet points are things that we've already discussed. Traditional challenge now being 2 rounds, with competitors performing 1 kata on the approved list. The top 4 advance, and then they must perform a different kata. So that's a big change that we already discussed a little bit. We also already discussed the sparring spread rule ad nauseum. And then let's move to ratings and rankings refresh is how this next one is titled. So the 2026 ratings will begin after the Compete Nationals, including points from the first 2 events. And then Ocean State will be using those new 2026 ratings. Rankings will update after every event and include all event results. So once you get through those first 2, after each event, you're getting a fresh ratings update. And then the top 10 scores will now count towards the final world champion rankings. Previously, I believe it was best of 9. It's now top 10 scores will count towards the world championship. Okay. I don't think there's many talking points there. That's more so just cut and dry updates.
No, and it is pretty cut and dry, but I think that when we went to 10 points and things like that, when we only had 3 tournaments that were 5A, once we started making changes, some changes impact other changes. And then you start saying, hey, we should just have them all the same. You can't count all the scores. I mean, some of us were advocating for all the tournament scores should be used at the end of the year. The problem with that, in the course of everybody's life, something happens on a tournament that you cannot be at that tournament. It could be a wedding, it could be a funeral, it could be both. Who knows? So you got to have at least one tournament where somebody can drop because they just couldn't make it for whatever reason. I just can't imagine anybody getting through a whole year hitting all 12 without any conflicts. So we did that just as a fairness to the competitors, giving them the opportunity to either take a month off or make up for the one they missed with one of the others.
Absolutely, I love that. And then let's go to, we talked about the sparring points changes. Again, for anybody that's just tuning in, going out of bounds, falling to avoid the fight is still a point the other way. It's just not called a penalty point. It is still a point that goes the other direction. You cannot avoid the fight without penalty.
And as somebody who centers fighting a lot, let me tell you right now as a warning for next year, and this is not a warning that'll get you disqualified. This is just a verbal warning. Is if you now, because I'm not giving you a penalty point, you fall down, you run out of the ring, or you avoid attack, I'm giving points like crazy. Because the whole point is to stay in there and fight. Some people I know I've done 100 times have not given that penalty point because I know that's a big deal, right? That's a big deal. And I know Bossanat, when he was up there on stage and gave that 3rd penalty point, he's just like, this. I just decided the grand championship on a penalty point, and he hated it. But it was the right thing to do. He did the right thing. He has the courage to make the right decision, but it's just hard to do. So now you're more free to award those points as necessary and as deserved to the person who's chasing the other guy, that without having to worry about disqualifying anybody.
Right. Absolutely. So again, ladies and gentlemen, the whole idea of falling or stepping out of bounds not being a penalty point is semantics. It is still a point that goes the other direction. We're just not calling it a penalty because a penalty suggests that can be grounds for disqualification once you accumulate 3 of them.
So, and to be another clarification, if I say point here for running, there's those little boxes on our displays, right? That keep total of the penalty points. You won't see that one change, right? So the only ones we keep track of are the actual penalty points. I could give 17 points and you'll never see a penalty point pop up there, but you're going to lose by a lot of points. So, 7-point spread, then you'll lose.
More than 7, right?
Exactly. Sorry.
So moving on from that, because we've talked about that one a lot. This one I'm really interested in because like my personal opinion is somewhat conflicted about how I feel about it. I'm just curious where it came from and not conflicted in a like good versus bad thing. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Team sparring tiebreaker. Quote, if a team match ends in a tie, the last two fighters face off, first to score wins. Which if you just hear that, you're like, wait, isn't that how it's always been? Because coaches often make the decision to keep the fighters out there. However, I've always thought it's kind of interesting that the coach has to make that choice of, do you send somebody fresh out there just to try to score the last point? Do you try to get the other matchup? So I liked, I guess in the past tense, the fact that coaches could do that. But I'm not opposed to making the last two fighters stay out there. I'm just curious.
Now if you're the coach, that's another consideration when you send that last fighter out. So you're right. You're right. We had discussions around, no, you should be able to switch to fighters. There should be a 30-second break. It should be a 1-minute tie-breaking round. I mean, we went through so many scenarios, you wouldn't believe it, because we'd heard all this feedback on different scenarios. But we found that the simplest one, and the coaches will have to consider this when who they determine goes out first and who goes out last, is that if it's 12-12, we're going to go, and the next point wins. And you're not going to change fighters. You're not going to get a minute to talk about it. You're just going to go.
Right. It essentially puts more weight on the anchor fighter, right? It's not just the anchor going out there to finish the fight. It's you trust this fighter that with one clash, everything on the line, that they'll be the one that comes out of it.
So, Jackson, I can help you out here just a little bit, because the ideology behind being able to swap fighters at the end was Mike and I are sparring, and my team's up 8 points. And then Mike and I are the last match, and all of a sudden he comes back and scores 7 points on me or 8 points on me and ties it up. Well, I didn't do very well. So the coach then would have the opportunity to change the fighter.
Yep.
Have a better chance.
Yep.
But again, to make things consistent in both teams and individuals, it just made sense to go to the sudden victory and the next point wins. And oh, by the way, there's no delay. There's no taking time. It's just, it happens immediately. And, so a coach cannot stand up.
And that's another one too. When a match is over, if it's tied, it's not over. Coach has got to stay in that seat. We go. Next point wins, go. And if that coach stands up because he thinks there's some kind of break, that's a penalty point. That is one of the ones that's funny, because several people went back and forth. Why is that one a safety one? Well, in the past, the reason we made the coach sit down is because sometimes the coach would launch himself into the ring. So we want to make sure coach stays in the chair.
Love it. And by the way, I'm seeing all these comments coming through about ideas for new team sparring divisions, whether it be 3 women team sparring, whether it be mixed teams. These are all things that are not going to happen before Warrior Cup. However, the fact that we're saying it on this forum where you've got 2 promoters here, and I guarantee everybody in the comment section, other promoters are watching this as we speak. I just want to make that known. This is a great platform for the community to be able to share those thoughts directly, so that maybe when that next meeting comes up in June, maybe these are things that wind up being on the table for 2027 that just hadn't been brought up before.
Yeah, and we have sorted through all of the different posts and comments over the last 5 days or 4 days to cherry pick out the ones that make sense. Like when Tony today said a 35 plus open weight division would be great. And then immediately went to, hey, we should have a trad challenge and a Korean challenge 35 plus. And he mentioned 35 because he still thinks that the 31, 32, 33-year-olds are in their prime. We went to 30 plus because we did 30 plus, 40 plus, and maybe it was some kind of numerical thing. And people like me with OCD felt better being on zeros. But 35 probably is a better number if there's only one split, right? But I think that would be well attended. But again, we're in this for the long haul. We've been doing this for a long time. We're going to keep doing it for a long time. We don't need to make abrupt changes. We had to make some. We made as many as we thought were acceptable for such a short term. And we had, obviously had a very quick turnaround, right? Because the first term was in January. But we are totally open to all new ideas that makes it a better experience for the fighters and for the forms and weapons people, all of them.
Well said. Well said. We've got a few more points to get through before I lose my voice here.
Okay.
Speaking of seniors, the new senior team format Two quick bullet points here. Senior fighting teams now consist of 3 fighters aged 30 plus. And then the previous requirement that you had to have a 40 plus fighter has now been eliminated, right? So hopefully that just means that we'll get more senior teams participating in senior teams. Because if anybody has watched that division, that's a phenomenal division to watch. So hopefully we get even more teams involved in it now.
We hope so.
Jackson, you said that very well, because the feedback we were getting from the senior teams is why they weren't participating anymore, was they were having a very difficult time finding 40 plus and 50 plus fighters that wanted to go into that team situation with a 30 plus guy. So it doesn't mean that a 40 plus or a 50 plus guy still can't come down there and be on that team.
Sure.
Because it's 30 plus. So, and that was actually the ideology behind that change. And it's really kind of came down to, it's what they asked for.
Right. It was tough for them to pull the teams together.
Yep.
If you did this, we could probably get more teams. Done.
Absolutely. And then next up, we've already talked about the update with the prize money and the fact that people have to be NASKA members. Again, if you're just tuning in, stay tuned for more updates about what it means to be a NASKA member and new membership packages that might be on the way. When it's time, NASKA will release that information. And then talks about the new rule book, and then it gives a good hoorah message about 2026 being awesome and everybody looking forward to it. So
and everybody go read the new rule book.
Yes, that is one of the closing points that I wanted to make, is that if you have seen this news and you have jumped into comment sections this week and the extent of your reading has been the summary PDF, you're doing something wrong.
Yes.
You need to go read the full rule book so that you understand the highlights, the things that the summary is trying to draw your attention to, that you then need to read all the details on. I cannot stress the importance of that enough.
And when you see the new rule book, it's got kind of some rearrangement a little bit, but the new stuff is highlighted in yellow. There's a ton of it. There's no way, unless we just copied the rule book into the summary, which is not a summary, there's no way we could explain it other than just give you a bullet point, which was just enough information to, wet your whistle. I'm going to go find out what they really mean by this. And then the details are in there. And, again, it's well thought out. It's all done to make the sport better for all of us. We really are part of the whole sports entertainment world. People come and they want to be entertained. They want to see what they're doing. I mean, a lot of people come to us and say, well, what you guys do is not real martial arts. And I said, no, it's performance martial arts, and it's real martial arts, but it's performance-based. It is basically to people to demonstrate their skills. Same with point sparring. They're not allowed to knock each other out. That's fighting. Not allowed to knock each other out. They're sparring. They're allowed, and it's all about speed and technique, and it is exceptional to watch if you know the rules. So it is all of these changes are done to enhance the sport, to make it more attractive, and having a larger NASKA membership base will allow us. And somebody commented about NASKA hasn't had a corporate sponsor ever. Yeah, we've had several. It didn't last. We weren't able to provide them what we need to be able to provide them, which is maximum exposure to as many eyeballs as possible, and work with these corporate sponsors. Most of the events have all kinds of sponsors. So it's not like there aren't sponsors, it's just not a corporate sponsor. And we would like to do that, but NASKA has to be built in a way to attract that person. And female fighters too. I mean, Female Fighters Matter too. Maggie has done a great job of supporting many of the events. She loves the sport. She is going to put a tremendous effort into it. You'll see her almost every one of the events. Every event's a little different. So she has kind of preferred to kind of do it what she wants to do at each of the event, which is what some of the sponsors have chosen to do too. But if we can build this database, this membership database for NASKA, then we have something we can sell as NASKA to sponsors that then all the tournaments will benefit from. And that money, the more money NASKA has, the more it can reach out to more people and grow the sport. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything you do today costs money. You can't do anything for free. You can't do mass media, social media marketing without money. And we've been running on a shoestring for a long time. And the tournament's promoters spend a great deal of money making sure their events are the best they can be. It's time that NASKA pulls all that together, builds a big membership database, and gets out there and grows this sport, reaches out to people who currently don't come to the tournaments.
Well said, Mike. And Jackson, I would like to say this about the rule book, because I don't know Well, I'm just going to say it. I don't know if anybody's been in there more than I have in the last 2 years.
I doubt it.
But I will tell you this. I realize, and we all realize, that it's not very user-friendly, but there's some things coming that's going to make it a lot more user-friendly. We just haven't got the time to do that yet. And to make it more user-friendly can still come without changing any of the rules. So you may see that, shortly after the first event or second event is completed.
Yeah, more changes coming to make things easier, organizing the rule book in a way you can search better and things like that. But it was important for us to get these changes out and that new rule book out so people could see what the rules are, say, okay, going forward, this is what I need to do, and start their training. They still have plenty of time to get ready for AKA. It doesn't really ask them to do much different than they're already doing, but it does give them some opportunities to do some new things they didn't do. So we need to let them.
I love it. And so I want to bring us back to, I gave an opening monologue that I'm going to reference, and I'm going to give a closing monologue, and then I'll leave it to final thoughts from the two of you, which are really the most important voices of the show tonight. For the audience, try to ignore any of my personal opinions on this, that, and the other. What matters is the decisions that were made and what goes into it. I'm just kind of here to facilitate that discussion. But I opened the show, for those of you that joined us somewhere in the middle, I opened the show talking about, everybody should be looking at this and understanding that the promoters as a collective unit were trying to only do good things for the sport. Things that either improved player safety, improved the entertainment value of the sport, or improved the efficiency of the sport for the user experience when you're at a tournament, so you're not waiting on hours on end for XYZ to happen. Those were the three things that the promoters sought out to do, right? Efficiency, entertainment, and player safety above all else, right?
Above all else, exactly.
And when the promoters have that mindset of doing the things that are going to help the sport get more exposure and keep the athlete safe while doing so, as a community, we've got to give them some grace when there's something that we don't agree with, and we've got to trust that they're doing the thing that is in our best interest, right? And not everybody's going to be spot on with every single decision that they make. No organization has ever gotten every decision that they ever made correct just because they're an organization, right? There's going to be things that we have to try and we have to learn from, but it's all with the mentality of making us better, right?
Yeah.
And the closing message that Jackson wants to leave with, this is not Jackson speaking for the promoters, but this is Jackson, who has lived an incredibly blessed life, and consider myself to be the man that I am today because of the things that I learned on NASKA, because of the things that I achieved on NASKA. Without NASKA, I am nowhere near the person that I am today. And I mean that from a character standpoint. I mean that from being a neurosurgery resident. Like these things don't happen if not for the amazing things that this organization did for my life. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, really important that as this organization goes through change and as there are attempts to make the sport better and better, that we give the promoters the grace and understanding of knowing that the promoters have seen that story played out time and time again. The promoters have seen countless athletes go on to have successful careers, whether it's in the professional sector, as stunt performers, as martial arts school owners. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. The promoters have been there every step of the way to see what this organization can do for people. And my final point is that as a competitor, right, I personally don't want to hear any discussion about, oh, well, we could go do this or we could go do that. As a competitor, there is no higher honor than what you can achieve on NASKA, right? Winning the Battle of Atlanta means something. Winning in the ISK Night of Champions at the U.S. Open means something. Having Warrior Cups means something. Having diamond rings means something. Every event on this world tour, it means something. And it means something beyond, well, you know, I went to a karate tournament and I did well and I won X prize money, right? Never as a competitor did that matter to me. What mattered to me as the competitor was I want that title because that title means something to me.
Yeah.
And NASKA provides that unlike any other organization can.
Agreed.
That's my closing monologue.
And thank you very much for that. That's what we've tried to do for 50 years. right? Some of these events, the ones you've mentioned, are over 50 years old. They're successful and they've survived this long because they've provided those benefits. And I will argue till the day ends that we have the best athletes in the world at our events. And I've seen that when I've been to the Irish Open several times and watched, forget weapons and forms, wasn't even much competition, but watched all the American athletes just walk right through all the Europeans, right? I mean, because their medal is cut on the toughest stages in the world, and that's the NASKA events. And going to other events, they're going to be just as successful. So we're proud of what we've done. Do we do everything perfectly? No. Are we open to change, or are we willing to listen to everybody about what they think we should change? Absolutely.
Beautiful. And Mr. Ruth, any closing comments?
I don't think I can top any of that. I do feel very, very strongly about what you said, Jackson, and it's always been a little bit discouraging when guys grew up. You know, I watched them grow up from 10 years old to becoming adults to, realize that this sport, this organization built who they are, not necessarily as a martial arts competitor, but as a human being. And I've seen so many great stories like yourself. And obviously your story is very remarkable, Jackson, and I've told you that personally many times. But there's more out there just like it, and we don't hear enough of them. So I think the closing thoughts for me is that I think the majority of us, I know myself, feels this way. We just want to create the most safe, most user-friendly platform we can create for people to come out and show their talent. To basically at this point to each other, because we haven't been able to, reach out outside of this little world. But I've said this many times, and I'm going to say it again. We're the best kept secret in the whole world because we have some great athletes. We have some great young men and women that have remarkable stories. We have some great young men and women that weren't always have the ability to maybe play football or basketball or golf or any of those other mainstream sports, but they're super talented in what they do, and they deserve to be seen and heard.
Beautiful. Couldn't have said it better myself. And ladies and gentlemen, I want everybody to please give, drop likes, drop comments, and give a big thank you to Mr. McCoy and Mr. Ruth for taking the time to come on the show in a time where things were pretty tumultuous on social media over the last week, and being willing to have open discussion and answer these questions. From my standpoint and Sport Karate Zone specifically, that's the whole mission of why I won't even call it a company, because I don't make any money off of it. That's the whole reason this passion project exists, right? The passion project that is Sport Karate Zone exists as a retired competitor's desire to help this sport be seen by more people, to maybe help NASKA, be able to go out and get some of those sponsors because we've got the eyeballs. Some of it is the views that we get on social media. So go make sure that you're supporting all the media companies, not just Sport Karate Zone, but also sportmartialarts.com and Point Fighter Live and all of the people that dedicate their time to helping to cover this amazing sport and the amazing athletes within it. But really, one of the big reasons for this show tonight was to help show the community that the promoters are trying to help, even if there's a rule that you don't agree with, and that makes it seem like the promoters aren't in having your best interest in mind. They really truly are, and ultimately, if we can all work together on this, it is going to help the sport grow and get to the place that we all know that it deserves to be.
Well said, sir.
Amen.
Amen.
One more time, thank you to both of you for taking the time tonight. Again, I hope that everybody that tuned in shows some love in the comments and just appreciates the time that you guys donated tonight. And for me, this has been episode 140 of the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I'm Jackson Rudolph, and I'll see you next time.